As the yuletide approaches, security and safety of lives and property have been on the front burner.
With recent breakdown of law and order due to cultism activities in Aguda Surulere here in Lagos, to increased rates of armed robbery, there is a need to inform the public about how to be safe and secure this season.
Indeed, and well, joining us to bring her experience to bear from her intelligence work with the U.S. Department of Defense, DoD, and the U.S. National Security Agency, NSA, is Chief Intelligence Security and Defense Analyst Tanwa Ashiru. Thank you so much for joining us, Tanwa.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you again. A lot has happened since the last time you were here. But let me begin with the police, because the police, Nigeria Police Force, gave a scorecard some days ago, and it says, since the beginning of this year, it has arrested 6,531 high-profile suspected kidnappers, robbers, cultists, among other criminals. Now, for you, are these numbers normal? What do these numbers say? And if we've arrested that high number this year alone, why do we still have insecurity on the front burner?
Exactly. So a high arrest should equal a reduction in incidents, but we're not seeing that correlation. Now, recently with the cultist clash that happened in Surulere and Aguda, I don't know if you saw, but some of the news that came out from that was, we saw some videos. Some policemen were there, but they weren't, they were attached to some of the companies.
Banks.
Exactly. They were there. So they didn't actually respond to the situation. But then eventually when SARS and the police actually showed up, they showed up after the actual culprits had
long gone.
Long gone. They were gone. And then they started just picking up people from just young men who were in the area. So, again, sometimes I question these arrests. And again, it says suspected. So, obviously, they haven't been convicted. And some of these people may be innocent. My take on it, and what I feel the police should do, is they should look, is there a correlation between the increase in arrests, which is you've taken these criminals, if they're criminals or if they're actually the people, off the streets, and we should see a reduction. But unfortunately, that correlation is not happening.
It's even, very sad when you look at the fact that we have a yuletide season and all this petty crimes have started again. I mean, I was hearing about an incident the other day on the Carter Bridge and even on 3rd Mainland Bridge.
Even the girl that was stabbed.
Yes.
And her laptop stolen.
And a laptop stolen. You're having increase in petty crimes like that. And what shocks you sometimes is the reaction to all of this, the reaction time of those in authority to all of this.
Yes.
You've been able to establish on this show that the police is stretched already. But isn't that going to make a case for private guards carrying arms, like somebody did make on this show? Shouldn't that be... I don't know, but...
Yeah, so it's not going to happen, at least not in the near future, of private guards carrying arms. And again, we already have an issue with arms. It's not really more arms. Let's call a spade a spade. You're just talking about the UK. And how often do you see their policemen on the streets with arms? I know things have changed a little bit, but you have to learn at some point to introduce technology into this and try to make that work for you as much as possible. But yeah, with these crimes that we started seeing, this is normal with this time of the year, unfortunately. In Lagos, we see increased traffic in December, and that usually correlates with an increase in traffic robberies. We see that quite a bit. One of the advice that we tend to give people is, look, do not struggle with them. Hand it over. Just give them what they're asking for. And here's the reason why. I once read about a person who, she had an iPhone 4 at the time and, was struggling with the robbers who were trying to take it from her. Eventually, they just killed her and took the phone. That was iPhone 4. What iPhone are we on now?
11.
12.
It's not worth it. It's not worth your life. So whatever it is they're asking for, just give them, just focus on making sure that you can make it through. Your life is not taken because of material property.
Okay, I mean, you have mentioned introducing technology, so I would like to find out what kind of technology we can introduce to help with policing in Nigeria. And I also want to talk about the revised national strategy that was put forward by this current administration. They say that their focus is, one, cooperation amongst intergovernment security agencies, as well as focusing on the socio-economic challenges. And I'm just curious to know, one, how they are going to achieve that, because that's not the core responsibility of these security agents.
Yeah, so nothing new in that strategy. What they're saying the right things. Everything they said there makes sense. The question is, how are we going to make sure that it's well implemented? That's really the main issue here. And some of these things are actually cultural. We see that with some of our security agencies. They just do not get along. And if you're going to be intentional about making sure that they get along, it has to start from the top. They have to be seen, the leaders have to be seen speaking to each other. They have to create things, just sometimes even informal ways of making sure that they all interact with each other. And that may help out quite a bit. Something as simple as a football game between this agency and that agency. You end up, and you mix them together. It's not one against the other. You're mixing them together. So they learn to work together. And then eventually when an incident happens, I can pick up the phone and call my contact who is in this agency, share information with him, get what he has, and take it forward. So they just need to be very intentional about implementing this new strategy.
What about technology? You haven't answered that question. What kind of tech can we see in security that would help?
Okay, so CCTV, I know we keep talking about it. Somehow we have an issue in just making this thing work, right? Lagos State introduced something where they were trying to incorporate, make businesses make sure that they have CCTV cameras. And in doing so, if an incident happens, say, around here, because your organization has a CCTV camera outside, the Lagos State or police can come to you and request the footage for that. So I know they were looking into trying to make sure that this was a general thing across the states. But it goes as far as, number one, deterring people. Sometimes, if I want to rob a location, and I see a place with a camera and I see a place without a camera, I mean, come on, I'll probably go for the other one because I don't need people seeing my face. So it deters people sometimes, and also it helps with investigations. Something actually does happen, you're able to go there, figure it out, watch and see the faces of who has done it, and then be able to actually go after them. And also with biometrics, it's very important. Let's track who is in the country. Let's know who we are.
Let's know how many we are.
I mean, that's talk for another day, but very good when you were saying about, interministerial sports game and things like that. I mean, there was a truce held in the thick of the First World War between the troops because they played football together on Christmas Day, funny enough, which is your birthday. But let me talk about this real quickly. Are there troubled spots in Lagos that you know about that you can just, give us some of this intel about that we should be careful about, those troubled spots? Yeah,
so again, Lagos is very fluid. Right? Today we think it's a trouble spot, and next thing you know, it's moved on somewhere else. Who would have thought that Surulere Aguda would be experiencing what we saw right there on the streets in front of the very busy area? So it's very fluid. What I would tell people, though, is that areas that have dense traffic, you want to be very careful with them. We have some regular spots that we keep hearing all these cultist clashes. Lagos Island, that's one key area that happens in Ikorodu as well. We tend to see that quite a bit. So you want to be careful, obviously, when you're in some of these areas. With Ikeja, we tend to see more of road traffic accidents. Accidents, the Otedala Bridge as well, the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway reports the highest volume of accidents and fatal accidents at that across Nigeria. You would think with that sort of information, our agencies will go there and put the necessary safety measures in place, but we're not quite there yet. So again, this is a very, very, very good question you asked, because what we want people to do is that prior to going anywhere, just try and do a little bit of research on that area, figure out what the current issues are, the current threats are, and try and have a plan ahead of time before you depart.
1 million boys and Awawa.
Yes, Awawa.
That menace has been on for a while in Lagos. They have key areas. They're moving around. I mean, 1 million boys is a group of young boys between age 10 to 15 that they go around and they commit mayhem. They rob you dry and things like that. I mean, what has been done to tackle those boys this season? I hear this, their peak season.
Yeah, so there's even an actual day, apparently. It's called 7/7, which is like the 7th of July, where they tend to do these initiations. The police know about it, and they tend to go after the cult groups. And I remember this year when they went after them, you just mentioned 2, right? 1 million Awawa. But they actually found 10 active cult groups that were operational here, minimum, on that day when they did that raid. And so what you see is that groups from different parts of the Southwest, other parts outside Ogun State and so on, they all come into town for this. Yeah, it's a thing, so it's a problem. The police are aware of it. They're trying to do what they can do. But remember, you just mentioned something about the socioeconomic factor of it. You have young people who have no jobs and a lot of energy.
Tanwa, we'll take a break and we'll be back. Because I do know the governor recently mentioned amnesty, and that was controversial. We'll take a break. I'll be right back to talk some more on security. Welcome back to the morning show here on the Rise News. We're still talking about national security as well as security during this Yuletide. And Chief Intelligence, Security and Defense Analyst Tanwa Ashiru is helping us discuss this. So thank you so much for staying with us. Before that break, we're talking about hotspots in Lagos, the cultism ongoing. And you've mentioned what the people can do. Research these places, don't struggle. But let's flip the coin to the security agencies. What can they do? Because I've heard security analysts say, in fact, the fact that we have bad infrastructure, bad roads, contributes to the level of insecurity we have in a state like Lagos, where you have those bad roads, you have the traffic, and of course, robbery, So what can the security agencies do at this time? Some have said, perhaps station more men, station the armored vehicle, the tanks. Do those help? What should they do?
Yeah, so it's a form of show of force, let them know that you are there. And it tends to work, especially if there's something big coming up. You send a lot of security agencies there. And so their presence there would deter people. Again, we're talking about deterrence. So that's one key way. But I think security agencies and their leaders, the leaders of the country need to be more proactive. What does that mean? You just mentioned when we were off air that you would get calls. A lot of people would call in and report, hey, there's this issue. These Awawa boys are doing this. Now, this actually tends to happen quite a bit. People call the emergency number here for Lagos, for example. And the report, I remember one time when we were going through the data, one of the things we saw, there's a particular part of Lagos where a lot of residents would call and report boys who were getting high, smoking, and just causing a bit of ruckus. It all tended to happen around the same area. And when I looked at that and I presented this to the decision makers, I said, look, what does this tell you? This is where the drugs are being used. Where should you send the NDLEA? To this area. You understand? So we could be a bit more proactive, number one, and a bit more strategic in how we're responding to the issues based on information that's coming in.
Because I knew you were coming, I really took a long, hard look at this national security reassessment. And one of the things I noticed that was missing from this document is the fact that there's no focus on or mention of clear terms of how we're going to reduce the military in internal security and leave it for the policemen. I know that Nigerian citizens have lost their faith in the local police. However, it's still really important that they're allowed to do their job. So I'm just curious to know what your pushback for that would be. And also community policing. I mean, we have 18 states currently community policing right now, but some will still consider it a strange phenomena in their communities because they don't see it being effective. What would you say to this?
So first things first, you did really good in your research and in pointing that out and figuring that out. One of the things that when I say we are private sector security practitioners, noticed was there actually was no role for private sector security practitioners as well. And there's a lot that we can contribute and bring to the table to help things out a little bit. So in you recognizing that they didn't necessarily figure out a way to transfer security from military to more civil and civilian rule, then that's actually a very key problem that we also identified with the strategy. It should be looked into. Private sector, using more NSCDC, using more of the police, community policing. Here's the issue with that. First of all, people in the community should know the police. If you think about it, right, in America, the policeman lives within the community. When he's leaving, your neighbor is a policeman, and so on. But over here, the structure we have puts them within a barracks, right, or within a specific compound. So they're not necessarily, they can't get to actually mingle with the community. We don't necessarily know who our policemen are in the area. So how are we going to be comfortable sharing information with them? If the incident that happened recently in Ikoyi with the MD of Maersk, for instance, when the call went out, it said the commissioner of police physically was there and he also responded. But how often does that happen to anybody else? When do we get to see that? So you're right, the police have a lot of work to do. With community policing, again, something as simple as them being out there, making sure the neighborhood knows who they are, so that if something is going on, we're comfortable sharing and passing on the information to them. So that may be just at least one key area where they could start working on.
But another question is the politicization of community policing. I mean, the long argument about state police has always been, you leave this in the hands of people with certain political leanings or affiliations. This is what they will do. by having this so much power, even in the communities. You have rival factions. Take, for instance, I mean, because I heard some gist about the Surulere debacle, was that the police on SARS came in late deliberately because they wanted the rival faction to fully have their day against the other faction, because that fight was a reprisal. Somebody was killed, actually, and that was a reprisal fight.
Well, I mean, I don't know, that just sounds like a gist. But what I tell people, especially those who are against state policing, is, look, we're already having those issues anyway, right? So if what you're currently doing is not working, there's nothing wrong with trying out another strategy. And what I always say with that is, look, let's not necessarily sit here and discuss how it can't work. Assuming it can work, how can we make it function well? How can we make sure it's successful? And let people brainstorm on that and see how we can put things in place to make it work. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Nobody can protect their home better than the homeowner, you know. And it does me no good for you to send me to Zamfara. I don't speak the language. I don't know what language is being spoken there. You can't. You don't know the area. You don't know the people. And look at what I said. They're going to send me there and put me in a barracks, which means I'm never really going to intermingle with the locals as well. So it's not working right now.
Indeed. You know, people make that argument that community police or state policing will be abused. Well, the federal police has already been abused. I want to ask you about national security now, because I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, the governor of Borno State, Governor Zulum, was appealing to the Nigerian army to please come and rescue 3 of his local governments from Boko Haram. He's saying that the insurgents have stronghold on 3 local governments. Does that come to you as a surprise after the federal government's repeated claims of decimation?
So it's not a surprise. I mean, this news or this story or this rumor had been going around for quite a bit within our circles. It seemed like it had been hidden, and people didn't want the rest of the country to panic. You know, how is Boko Haram or the insurgency moving from the northeast sweeping across to the northwest? What they're seeing in the northwest may be slightly different, in that a lot of those people, the insurgents, the bandits, whoever, also have access to these open borders that we've been discussing. Major issue, uncontrolled borders. And so they go out, they get their weapons, they get training from Mali, from the other northern countries, and then come back into the society, the community. What the Zamfara state governor is actually dealing with is a lack of security presence across his state. I saw a video of the bandits who came in, a whole group of like 40 of them on a motorcycle, in the community, driving there with their weapons, shooting, and nothing happened to them. They were there. There was no police in sight. There was no security presence in sight. So that is really more of what he's dealing with in that state. There needs to be some kind of security presence, which right now he's not having. They're not having it.
But a lot of people will say, hey, the threats are big. The threats are across the Sahara region. I mean, see what happened in Niger. 76 soldiers were killed.
Yes.
I mean, see what's happening in Chad. See what's happening with the Tuareg rebels across the Sahelian belt. G5 met recently to talk about this. So a lot of people are going to say, maybe we're personalizing this too much. The threat is across sub-Saharan Africa.
Yes.
And why don't we look at it that way too?
Well, they are looking at it that way, but let us be aware that that same threat is coming into our country as well. It's a problem. Burying our head in the sand, you know, acting like it's not happening is not going to change the situation, number one. Number two, branding it as a tribe or as a group is very dangerous. And things like that immediately shut out solutions. You can't come here and say it's a specific tribe that's doing it. Immediately, people are going to shut off and say, well, no, you can't. So there's
People
a lot of technicalities.
People are going to shut up and say, what? No, you can't. People are going to shut up and say, what? No, you can't do that.
Yeah, you can't do that. You can't call my tribe just because, you know, a lot of, for instance, just because a lot of Yoruba people are cultists, you can't now come and say Yoruba cult groups, cult groups. It's not, immediately, you're going to have people from within the Yoruba ethnic
defensive.
Group. Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's not going to solve the situation. It's better for you to say Awawa. It's better for you to call them their specific group names. And
ISWAP.
Exactly. And go in there and actually just target them, take them off the operating environment.
Well, very quickly, in about 30 seconds, and because of this pushback you've mentioned, the federal government is de-radicalizing Boko Haram, former Boko Haram fighters, and reintegrating them into society. This has caused some skepticism in some quarters of society. And there were rumors that some of them are being employed into the Nigerian army. The army has denied that. But what stops these de-radicalized Boko Haram fighters from joining the army?
Well, so
what's your take?
Yeah, so I actually spoke to one of the generals who was in charge of this operation, and what he explained was that at a point, Boko Haram forced some young boys in the community, forced them to join their ranks. So they didn't willingly want to do it, or they weren't originally from that. So those are the sort of people that they were going through or taking them through the de-radicalization process. Okay. Yeah, so I mean, joining the military, there's a whole process behind it, training and all.
Thank you so much, Tanwa. It's always a pleasure having you here.
And that brings us to the end of the show today. I am Adesua Omorwan.
I'm Afayo City.
And I'm Sheto Atigari. Thank you for watching. From our entire team here in Lagos, enjoy the rest of your morning and, of course, the rest of your day. Be safe.